Welcome back to One on One with Mr. U. Of course, I am your host, Mr. U, in studio with us. He's an expert, has extensive expertise and commitment to improving the lives of individuals and families from a clinical psychologist perspective. Please welcome Dr. David Marcus. Dr. David, how are you, man? Good to have you here.
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, man.
The pleasure's mine. The pleasure's mine. You guys that are watching and listening for the very first time, first off, thanks for making us part of your week. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, of course. This episode will be up on the audio platforms, hopefully within the month of June. We'll do the scheduling, but thanks again for making us part of your day and for tuning into this conversation. If you have a question for Dr. David or myself, whether you're watching the episode, drop it in the comments section. We'll answer those on air live, long as they pertain to the conversation, of course. But thanks again for joining the discussion and making us part of your day. So, Dr. David, you have a lot of experience when it comes to helping families under stress and parent-child communications. But one thing I want to hear before we get into your work, tell me about you. Where you come from? How did you get to the place as a young person to where you are now, being a doctor and helping other families? What was kind of the spark that caused that to happen?
Well, they always say there's a reason why people go into mental health. All right. It's true for me too. No, when I was growing up, there was virtually no emotional communication in my family. All right. My mother, I think, was pretty depressed, and my father was gone a lot. I mean, he loved us, but, and he tried to connect with us and do things with us, but he was very busy. And there was no development of an emotional connection within my family, although I had one with my father later on when I was already a teenager. All right. So when I went to college, I was a psychology major, but here's the ironic part, Mr. Yu. I didn't think about being a clinical psychologist. I did all the research courses in psychology. And eventually I did research on, believe it or not, neuroendocrinology. I mean, hard medical research. And I presented that paper at a convention in New York because it actually worked. And then I had a grant to continue that work. And I decided I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to continue to just be in a lab, to tell you the truth. I needed more people contact,
Hands-on stuff. Okay.
On top of that, my father passed away when I was in school, and I realized that he was always chasing a dream that he never really realized. And it actually gave me a different perspective. And I said, hey, I don't want to pursue something just for the sake of pursuing it. So I volunteered at a hospital for adolescents. And from there, I got a job as a counselor at a foundation in Philadelphia. And then I decided to go to graduate school. So, that's sort of the long roundabout way I became a clinical psychologist. And when I was in school, I had some very excellent supervision and excellent insights from the supervisors I had, And I realized my interest was in children, and actually to advocate for children, because even the children I saw in the clinic at the University of Louisville, where I was going for my doctorate, they were really troubled kids from high stress families. That's why they were coming to see me. And I said, these kids need somebody. They need somebody to be able to speak for them and be able to develop a way they can speak to me, because a lot of them came from a similar background. In high stress families, for instance, the parents are so consumed with just dealing with each other or whatever's stressing them out that there's very little time for their children.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. When you say high stress families, and you sounded like you intimated and you came from one as well. Give me some characteristics of a high stress family. What that looked like? Because I think this is before you answer that, I want to preface my question. Because people I'm around, people who I am in circles with, they make it sound almost like this stress is a normal. Like if it's not here, we'd miss it. Like it has to be a part of this dynamic of a family. So I love to hear, in your mind, what does a high stress family look like? And you can speak to good or bad aspect of it. Go ahead.
Sure. A high stress family and simply cannot communicate well. They just can't. And this is how it kind of works. It's a very interesting question because it's part of something that I discovered in 40 years of practice dealing with high stress
Hmm.
families. Um, there's a phenomenon called being filled up. Okay.
Okay.
And this is what I mean by that. We all have an emotional space within us, Mr. Yu. And, you know, when we think of our emotions, we usually point to our chest and our heart, but really it's
Sure.
connected in our mind. And, we like to think of ourselves as logical human beings, but truthfully, most of the associations in our mind are emotional. All right.
Emotional. You're right. Yes, sir.
So this is what I'm getting at. This emotional space can get filled up. And what fills it up is sometimes obvious, intense emotion, anger, fear, anxiety, apprehension, frustration. In fact, in little children, when you give them a little toy, they get intensely gleeful, and that fills them up. All right. But what I want your listening audience to understand is what happens when we get filled up. First of all, we know when we're filled up. We have phrases to describe it, like "I've had it up to here," or "the straw that broke the camel's back," right? Things like that. So we're aware of it, and what we're aware of is how uncomfortable it is. It
Hmm.
feels intense. Sometimes it's scary because we don't understand why we're feeling so intensely. We don't know what to do with it. So what do? As human beings, we focus inwardly to try to cope with how we're feeling. And we may do 100 different things to cope with it. Yeah, we may get it off our chest with somebody, or we could journal it, or we can go for a run to get rid of the energy, or watch TV and distract ourselves.
Yeah.
You can pick the way to do that. But the point is, when we're filled up, we're focused inwardly. And so, by definition, we are not focused outwardly on what people are saying to us. Now, that's an important point because, you know, you ever hear the phrase a blinding rage, Mr. Yu? A
Oh, absolutely.
blinding
I've
rage.
seen it. Absolutely.
Well, you know what I'm talking about then.
Yeah.
Um, that's an accurate description of what happens to people when they're so filled up with anger, they're blind to what's going on around them.
Hmm.
You can give the calmest, most logical explanation to somebody who's in a rage why they shouldn't be feeling that the way they do, and they don't hear it.
Hmm.
Or they hear that 5% that somehow supports their rage, or something like that. So the person who's trying to, not understanding that the person's filled up, that person says, I can't talk to you. It's like talking to a brick wall. How many times have we heard that phrase in a high stress family?
Funny.
It's like talking to a brick wall. And that's where the history starts to, really get in the way of emotional communication. Because if it continues like that, then we're getting to the oh, here we go again stage. And people don't even want to try to communicate.
Yeah.
High stress. Things come to a family, job stress, financial stress, differences in parenting style, etc. You've got to be able to communicate about that kind of stuff. If you don't,
Absolutely.
it stays inside and intense. So what happens, to take it one step further, the person who's trying to explain things logically doesn't understand. They're getting angry because this person is just dissing them and saying you don't know what you're talking about or shut up or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
So they get filled up. Now we have two people who are filled up. Everybody wants to be heard. You listen to me. No, you listen to me. Oh, no, you listen to me. Of course, the louder they get, the more filled up they get. And it's a vicious cycle at that point.
Absolutely. And
You
that's
see them
common,
get,
man.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really common. That jockeying of position, if you will, that happens a lot when it comes to communication. You mentioned so much about being filled up, and you mentioned about the challenges that create stress, like job security issues, differing parenting styles, or
Yes.
just a number of other things that we can definitely name there. Everybody seems to want to be, I guess, filled in that sense with things that occupy their attention and their time, make them feel good, produce value, at least in their minds that they have
Hmm.
to their
Hmm.
family, to others, to the world. What's the emptying out process look like though? Because you can't just continue to keep filling up. I mean, doesn't sound healthy to be filled up all the
That's right.
time and never be emptied out. Physically, we tried that, we'd be in a hospital somewhere. So we can't do that. So how's that look? What's the emptying process
Okay,
look like?
that's the other part of the process, I talk about being filled up and then emptying out. The point is, and you just made it, to tell you the truth, that before a person can even hear you, whatever logic there may be, they have to be emptied out first, right? To get it from in
Absolutely.
here to out here. And the role that people play in emptying out, because this is important before we get into the actual process of emptying out, is what I call a soothing presence. Okay.
Okay.
And what a soothing presence in its simplest form is basically somebody who's okay when you're not okay, right?
Hmm.
When we think about the people we turn to when we're upset or, feeling intensely, we choose certain people, maybe family, maybe friends, but invariably those certain people are okay when we're not. All right.
Hmm.
And so I use the term a soothing presence because just being a calm person, which is good, doesn't happen doesn't happen in a vacuum. You know, yes, you can be a calm, listening, good, attending person, and the emptying out process is more than that. I'll get to that in a second. But you can't do it if you're preoccupied with all these other things that are bothering you. The
That makes
financial
sense.
stress, a fight with your wife, your kids are acting up. How are you going to be a soothing presence? So I talk to people about a couple of things. One is lifestyle. I mean, if your lifestyle is, running on empty and only just putting out fires as they come up, well, you're not going to be able to be a soothing presence because you're a human being. You can't do all that. So I talked to them about, hey, you've got to, have a getting rid of these impingements basically that are impinging on your ability to be a soothing presence. It's not easy sometimes, to think in those terms, but it's necessary. What I tell parents, for instance, is the best gift you can give to your children is to be okay yourself. Okay, because if you're not, you can't
Okay.
really attend to them the way they need it. All right. You're always preoccupied or you're always at your wits' end or whatever you want to call it. We have lots of phrases to describe that.
Yeah. Put
So,
your mask on first before you put on your children's mask, right?
well, the ironic part is children aren't fooled.
Yeah.
Children know their parents are. They're exquisitely aware of how their parents feel. I mean, you can pick up an infant, and if you're tense, they'll start to cry. I mean, this is just kind of part of it. I mean, there's ways to make up for being filled up yourself, and the basic thing when I talk to couples, for instance, is how can you be a soothing presence for one another? How can you anticipate things that are going to stress you out and work together to make sure that they don't stress you out, basically.
No, that makes
How do you
sense. That makes sense.
communicate about those things? Because then you can do that for your kids as well, you know? So it's a whole process. Maybe you can see that when I talk to a family, I'm not just talking to the children or the parents. In fact, some child therapists just talk to the child and brief the parents on what's going on. I don't do
Yeah.
that. Or I'm sorry, go ahead.
That makes sense to me. I never understood that
Mm,
because the perspectives are going to be different, and you kind of want to have, for lack of a better word, I can't find one this morning, a meeting of the mind, so to speak. You don't want to talk to the
mhm.
child and negate the parents, and vice versa. You kind of want to
Yes,
everybody have an understanding. You guys are in the same house. How many hours out of the day? So every week, every month, every
exactly.
year, you kind of want to make sure that you have a good
That's
stream of
true.
communication. But I want to ask you about that because I'm missing it in
Hmm.
your bio. I'm missing it in our conversation. What was the spark that caused you to be so passionate about children and parenting? Was there something from your life, from your experience, that kind of made it like, you know what, this is my mission? Out of all things
Okay.
that I could do, I'm skillful enough. I have the ability to do. This is the one thing I got to put all of my eggs into this basket. This is what I have to do. What
Okay.
kind of sparked that mission, if you will?
Well, Originally, it was just the high stress families and seeing the impact on the children.
Okay.
Okay, I said the children are typically these families come to me because their children are acting up. Well, no
Ah,
kidding, because the children aren't getting what they need, and so they're emulating the parents. They argue, they fight, whatever it might be. So the parents not realizing, typically parents will go to their friends and their relatives. Hell, they'll go to their bartender, say, "What do I do? Because my kids keep doing this stuff." And they finally come to someone like me because it's not working. All right. So they'll come in for their kids, not realizing that it's them that we need to work with, not just
ooh,
the children. See? See? So I never see children without seeing their parents, and I see them just as much. All right. Some therapists will disagree because the child needs to feel safe. No, no. I tell parents, I am not the agent of change. You are. I'm temporary. I'm an hour a week, maybe. You know what I mean? That's not going to make the difference. I don't have the magic wand, thou shalt be, well, I don't have it. Wish it did. I'd be probably a real rich psychologist, but it doesn't work that way. So I work with them. And what I say is, I'm going to tweak your parenting skills. And in the meantime, I'm working with them as a couple. There's a subtlety to this sometimes. You can't
yeah,
just turn to them and say, "Oh, you're really messing up with your kid." You can't say that to them. It's a
yeah, I
matter
understand.
of Yeah, we have to empower you to change. You may have to change lifestyle. You may have to change how you define words. You may have to change it to help your child to develop an emotional language so they can even talk to you. There's so much involved here, Mr. Yu. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's why,
it's pretty deep, man. You
yeah, it
you
is.
do you're
It's
doing big work, man. Dr. Dave, you're doing big work to be involved in this because most folks probably could not handle what you're looking at every day and what you're dealing with. And then you add on top of that social media. I want to hear your thoughts on that because I know
Oh
that
my
plays a big
gosh.
part in communication, in a
Oh my
good way,
goodness.
maybe perhaps, but in a bad way for certain.
Well,
Share on it.
you're ahead of me here because you're absolutely right. All right. The world is different than when I was brought up, probably even when you were brought up. It's
Oh yeah,
social media
dramatic.
is, you know, social media is convenient, but it's impersonal. And what can be said over social media can be extremely hurtful, especially, the cyberbullying we've heard about, especially for young teenage girls,
Wow.
tween girls, boys too, but tweens are just starting to get into adolescence. And it's called individuation. I've got to become my own person. But they don't know
Yeah.
what that means. They're developing all these new identities, the sexual identity, obviously, but popularity, the status is that, how smart you are, how athletic you are, all these things come to the fore at this time.
Yeah.
And because they're just new, you know, they haven't had the confidence building experiences yet to feel comfortable in their own skin, to accept these new roles, these new perceptions of themselves, really. So they're very vulnerable to criticism. They're very vulnerable to bullying. A simple example is, a 13-year-old would be mortified to be seen at the mall by their friends hanging out with their mom. A 17-year-old couldn't care less. As long as mom has the credit card, they're fine. You know what I mean? Because they've had time to grow into their own skin here, to become their own person. It's a
Right. Right.
very important part of individuation. All right. And so they're very vulnerable, you know. So social media can be really cruel. When people were bullied in the old days before social media, they had one or two people picking on them. Now it's 24/7 online. I'll give you an anecdote.
With
It's like this.
anonymity on top of that.
That's what I'm getting at. You want to
Yeah.
hear the anecdote? We have time for an anecdote here.
Of course. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I was seeing a I think he was 16-year-old boy. He was seeing me because he had a charge of assault. Okay, oh, wow, okay. He comes in, he's this really nice kid, good student, good school, never been in trouble before.
Okay.
What? What happened, right? Well, he's on his school football team. He's a wiry, like an end. He wasn't a big brute, kind of guy. But he was quick.
Okay.
And there was some school on some person, some guy going to a different, rival school who gets on social media and keeps dissing the team, his team, dissing the school, just saying really stupid things. Okay, I'll put it that way. Just
Gotcha.
and he's making people angry, you know, but it's anonymous. Well, this is what happened. Boy, I'm seeing goes to a party one Saturday night, and one of his friends says, "Hey, you see that guy over there? That's
Oh
him.
boy.
That's the guy." Well, my guy
It's a
goes
green
right
light.
up to him and pastes him one, knocks out three teeth, and breaks his jaw. One punch. Now, your audience isn't going to like to hear this, but as two men, I would have liked to seen that punch. I mean, that was quite a punch. You know what I mean? I don't approve of it. Please don't,
Be
people out there,
surprised the
please don't
audience
say
would
that.
like
The
to hear
Marcus thinks that's a good idea, but in any case,
it.
and
Yeah.
I'm going now. Whose fault is this? This boy has never been violent before. This person was being obnoxious, and they sort of, they had it coming. But he's the one who has the assault charge on him. I saw him like three or four times. I said, "This kid's fine. It's not, you know, it's not really, it's social media. You can say anything on social. This boy wouldn't have come up to the boy I was seeing and said all those things in person. He never would have done that. And so social media is too anonymous. All right. Um, the,
Yeah.
you
That
know,
see that's the I love the anecdote for not the reasons that people might think. I'm not condoning violence. You gotta do what you gotta do sometimes though. But the person that pointed him out, that's kind of how it is on social media. Oh, check it out.
yeah.
Check out the clip. Watch this video.
Uh-huh.
He said this about your team. He said this about you. And it's like that person's kind of a culpable as well. Because the guy would have never known. I mean, ignorance in this case might be bliss. He had no idea that the guy that was
Yeah.
been telling him is in the room. It might have been better not to be shared.
Well, now
You
we're
stay
talking
out
about
of
the
it.
adolescent brain. I
I
mean, do
know.
they really
I
make
know.
better good
I
decisions?
know.
But you're right. You're right.
You're right. You're right. Check out the
I
comment,
see
Dr.
that
David,
some.
from a
Yeah,
friend of mine,
I'm
David,
reading.
said the high suicide rate is among teen boys. They're 4 times more likely to follow through with it than girls.
Okay.
That's kind of
Okay.
what you were saying, was it not?
Well, it's true, but it's semi-related to what we're talking about. I'm not
Okay.
trying to imply that girls are the only ones, young girls are the only ones who get affected by social media. All right.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
not
of course
trying to
not.
imply that. Okay. But depression in men and boys relates to some of it's social, some of it's familial. All right.
Okay.
It's still, this sounds stereotypical, but I think it's still true. You know, we're supposed to be tough. Boys are supposed to be tough. They're not supposed to be emotive. They're not supposed to share their emotions like women simply do. I mean, it's stereotypical. I understand that, but we're brought up that way. We are the problem solvers. We are not the people who try to, tenderize the situation and really talk about emotions. And what teenage boys are going through right now, because that's I think who this person is talking about. They're under a lot of pressure
Hmm.
in this day and age. I see a lot of boys, for instance, from private schools. All right, and and the culture there in these college prep schools is, you know, high achievement, totally high achievement. You got to be star football player, have the lead in the school play, take three um, advanced placement courses and get all A's so you can get into, I don't know, Notre Dame or Harvard or something like that.
Oh yeah, sure.
Why are these
High
boys
achievement.
seeing me? They're seeing me because it's impossible. There is one of the etiologies, one of the sources or theories of depression is called learned helplessness. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. Learned helplessness
I haven't
basically
heard,
means I'm sorry.
I haven't heard that.
Okay. Learned helplessness is basically sort of what it sounds like. When you're in an important situation that's hard for you and you can't see a solution, you feel helpless. You've learned that there's nothing you can do. You see, that causes depression. And if it
Wow.
keeps
Okay.
going, you know, some of the parents went to the same school and their grandparents, but it's a culture. It's a cultural thing and a familial thing. And they don't want to disappoint their parents. These high
A lot of pressure, man.
expectations. Ironically, you know, these schools I'm thinking about, they're very sports related oftentimes. The status is, you know, sports. Well, maybe your son or your daughter, you know, is not a real sports person. Maybe they're artistic or musical, you know? And yet here they are, the status is sports and being the smartest in the school or whatever it might be.
Absolutely. So,
And so I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I want to ask you one final question. Uh, I know that you do a lot with parenting, and I know personally a lot of our listeners, they are parents. They're parents of multiple children. A lot of times they use social media to cry out for help. They're like, all right, this is overwhelming. I need a break. What do I do here? And they pull on fellow parents, for good or bad, depends on how you look at it. But what do you think are common parenting mistakes that you see that don't help you get resolutions for what you deal with in uh, emotionally charged, high stress home life situation? What are some common parenting mistakes? Kind of help our listeners and our viewers out with that if you can. Go ahead.
In order for them to understand exactly your question, I'm going to explain the emptying out process because that's where people
Okay.
make their mistake. All right. All right. Now, you think of emptying out, you think of getting it off your chest or catharsis back in the old days, when they used to call it catharsis. Um, but here it's different. A soothing presence needs to be a good listener, of course, we're
Fair.
assuming that. But what are you trying to do? Well, emptying out has to be done on three different levels of emotional intensity. These are my terms now, okay? It's just what
Okay.
I've learned from dealing with the children, etc. The top level, the easiest level, is the logical one, which is the here and now. And I use a simple example to explain it. You need to take out the garbage. Now, we have lots of words to describe that. It's your chore. It's full. The garbage is being collected tomorrow. No big deal, right? But then the next deeper level, or much more the intensity comes in, is the history level. This is the seventh time I've asked you to take out the garbage and you haven't done it. Okay. Now, of course, if you have to ask somebody 7 times,
It's a
you're going
lot.
to be more intense in the asking than the first time. But if you were a stranger who did not know this history, you might turn to that person and say, "What's the big deal?" So they didn't take out the garbage. The logic begins to break down a little bit. The deepest level, which I call the tapped into level, is the fact that you didn't take out the garbage when I've asked you 7 times means you don't listen to me. I hate when people don't listen to me,
Hmm.
you know. But my family doesn't listen to me. My father was always gone. There was no one to listen to me. I hated that. I felt so alone. Now, well, that's where most of the intensity comes from, exactly. But that's not what comes out first. You know what I mean? You have to, for instance, the top level is easy. You have lots of words to be logical. But the next level, when somebody says something like, "You always do this," or "You always do that," or "This always happens." Well, now they're talking about the history. They're talking about previous events. Tell me about the previous events. Empty them out. Or you can elicit it, say, "My guess is this has happened before." Is that close? And they'll empty it out. The deepest one, what is it like when I do that? What is it like when I don't listen? When you feel I'm not listening to you? What you're really trying to help them to do is to find their own emotional language so they can convey this to you in your soothing presence. You don't get, here's where the people make mistakes. All right.
Okay.
They'll, let's say it's about them. You don't listen to me. Well, one possible reaction is you get defensive. You say, wait a minute, I do, and you give examples of when you listen to them. Uh-uh, that's not going to go anywhere because what you're doing there is you're arguing emotional perceptions, which are not logical. Your perception is that you listen. Their perception is that you don't. So you've cut off the process of them learning anything because now they have to defend themselves. They have to defend their perception. All right. Instead, just to work on this one, you say, based on how you see it, no wonder you feel the way you do. Now, notice the qualifier, Mr. U, based on how you see it. I get very pragmatic and specific about the language here, as you may notice, because it's
Yeah.
important. Okay. Based on how you see it, no wonder. What are you doing? First of all, you're honoring their perception. They don't have to defend it. But the words based on how you see it means you see it differently. But now you've emptied them out, and now they're ready to hear you. You see, the listener repeats back what they've heard. Let's back up a little. I hear, this, and then, I've done it before, and it makes you feel like this. Is that close? The person who's being emptied out says, yeah, you get it. And they're emptied out. And not only have you emptied them out, you've done something even better. You've shown them respect. You're
That's good.
taking them seriously. You may not agree with them. I'm sure there are people that you respect that you don't agree with, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
so yeah, you've shown them respect. And if it's a teenager, you're showing them that, hey, you're growing up, and I appreciate that. You have your own opinion.
I love that.
I'll get to that. Yeah. Okay. Let
Yeah.
me finish
Well,
this.
let's go ahead and jump into it. We're at the end, so let's go ahead and
Oh, okay.
you
Let
can
me
jump to like
finish the
comment.
process. Okay. I see it this way. If you hit your brother, I have to make sure you're both safe, whatever it might be. All right. What can we do? It's called a merger to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And now you're working constructively on together on what happened and what we can do about it. Okay, you decide to do something and say, okay, let's check that out and see if it works. What have you done? The child says, I've been there, I've done that. He understands, he's helped me work it out. You know what we call that? Wisdom. The child has gained wisdom. And that's the purpose of parenting, is to help your children learn from their own experiences and gain wisdom so they can make well-advised decisions when they're away from you. Okay. That's a big statement, but it's a big process that we're talking about. So you want other things that are getting in their way real quickly?
Real quickly, please. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Young children, distracting them, all right? Making them laugh, making a joke out of it, putting them in front of the electronic babysitter, the screens, all right? I'm too busy right now. We'll talk about it later. You know, you know, trying to distract them by making a joke and making them feel something different. This does not empty them out. Here's the radical sentence I'm going to say. As a child and family psychologist, I would love to get rid of the phrase make feel better because it doesn't work for adults and it doesn't work for children. If somebody you were talking to said, hey, I'm feeling this, and you start to explain it and they cut in and try to make a joke of it, or just tell you, oh, just do this and you'll feel all better, would that be helpful? No, it would not be helpful. In fact, if it was a good friend, you just say, just hear me out. Children won't do that. You don't expect your 6-year-old to sit there and go, oh, will you just shut up and listen to me, mom? They're not going to do that. They're just going to go, uh-huh. And you think you've got it nailed until the same thing happens 3 days later and they're just as upset.
Absolutely.
This, okay, I'm trying to rush it as best as I can, Mr. Yu. There's a
No,
lot
you're
more
good,
to
man.
this, but that's the way it is.
what I have you do then, because there is a lot more. What I want you to do is, and firstly, thanks for being here and sharing your expertise. I believe you've been fantastic. Got some great comments that came through from our listeners and viewers today. So you definitely hitting the mark with the conversation. So thank you for doing that. Let folks know where they can find you and find your work. For those that are listening and not watching, I did have Dr. David's website and contact info on the screen. But of course, while he's talking and sharing that information with you right now for our listeners, I have it up on the screen for the viewers. So go ahead and let folks know, Dr. David, where they can find you and your work. Go ahead.
Well, they can find me, of course, at my website, which you have posted. On the website is also my email address, so they can contact me, which is dsmarcus, DSMARCUS, PhD, DSMARCUS, PhD, at ParentRx, PARENTRX, like parent prescription, .org, ParentRx.org. And if they want to consult with me, ParentRx.org. Thank you. And yeah, they can consult with me if they wish to. On the site is other podcasts that I've done with nice people like you, and so they're welcome to listen to that, where I get into more of the aspects of it. There's so much more to it. The whole aspect of discipline at different ages, for instance, that's connected to the emptying out process, but it's not the same. That how do you develop a common emotional language between your partner and a common emotional language with your children? That's an earlier process. If the children don't have the emotional language, they can't talk to you in the first place. You see what I mean? And so there's so much more to this, Mr. Yu, that your audience might be interested in, and it's up to you whether you want to go into that at some other time. But yeah, there's more to it than we've got to.
Yeah. We got it laid out so they can be able to find you, man. But this is the foremost expert on parent-child communication, child advocacy, coming from a field of clinical psychology, Dr. David Marcus. Thank you again for your time, sir. This has been fantastic. Look forward to further conversation with you in the future. And for you guys that are watching and listening, ParentRx, like a prescription, ParentRx.org. You can find him there. His email address, his contact information. Reach out. He's happy to talk to you. Have a great day. Thanks again for watching One-on-One with Mr. Yu. Have a good one.